All right, folks, this one is a really special one. Joining me today over Zoom is someone whose impact on the trumpet world is absolutely huge. But more importantly, he's someone I've looked up to for very, very, very many years. Bobby Shew is a legend, not just for the players he's worked with or the records he's made, but for the spirit he brings to music. He spent decades performing, mentoring, and inspiring generations of musicians, and yet he's still as passionate, sharp, and generous as ever. Today, we're not just going to talk trumpet, we're diving into stories, the struggles, the moments that shaped him, and the deeper why behind a life in music. So, Bobby, it's an absolute honor to have you here. Thank you so much for doing this, and I can't wait. I've been looking forward to this one for ages, so welcome.
Thank you so much, Louis. I mean, I'm very honored that a person of your caliber would invite me. And I'd like to start off with a little bit of sense of humor, if you wouldn't mind, because you started this. You called me a legend. Well, I'll tell you, if you look at the word legend, it's Legend, which is end, a leg and an end. What's at the end of a leg is a shoe. That's terrible, isn't it? But how fortunate.
I love it. That's brilliant.
I know it's awful. But,
I love it. That's a great way to start.
The other thing I have to tell you is the Shew is the next. It's the fourth name I've had in this life. It's the name of my second stepfather.
Oh yeah.
And it's an old English, Middle English name, and there was an automobile made in I think around in the 20s or 30s in England called the Shew.
Oh yeah,
the same spelling. Yeah, I mean, somebody sent me a picture of it. Like one of my British friends, and there's the hood, the front end of the hood of this automobile, and it's got Shew right on it. I went, oh my God!
There he is. He's everywhere. He's in all
I
of
need one of those
lands.
cars.
That's brilliant, man. Oh well, look, you're very welcome. Thank you so much for being here. So I kind of had a plan where I wanted to shape a bit of an arc over this interview, this podcast. And I got 5 sections: life and intention, stories and people, philosophy and motivation, mentorship and generations, and personal ritual and reflection. So I don't know how much we'll get to in terms of how thick we'll get into all of these sections, but that's the general gist of what I want to go over. And I just have a series of questions to start with, and maybe we can see where we go. We'll just take it from there.
That's fine. I just hope I can remember all of the stuff that you're asking. A lot of questions there.
It's good. All right, so let's just begin with looking back. What was the moment you realized music wasn't just what you did, but who you are?
It might have been about half an hour ago. I don't know. But, I mean, this is funny. I want to maybe override this whole thing by saying something very interesting about my life. I've tried to always to figure out, why did this happen for me like this,
Yeah.
I didn't come from a musical family at all. My second stepfather, Shew, had tried to play the trumpet for a year or two in elementary school, when he was about 10 years old or something. And it was a complete failure, but he happened to have a trumpet in the closet, and he pulled it out one time for a spring cleaning, and he tried to play God Save the King or Queen or whatever on it, and it was the worst sounding thing I ever heard in my life, But I'd never seen a trumpet before, and so when they'd leave me with a babysitter, I'd sneak into the closet and pull that trumpet out, and I didn't know what to do with it, but I'd just smell it, And it was a $39 trumpet. The brand name was Marceau, Marceau, and which was a student model from the French Besson Company. I later found out, and the mouthpiece in there said Besson 4, and it wasn't a Bach 7C, and it was a bit of a bowl shape, but it wasn't as deep as most of the other kids. Yeah. So I had a very easy time playing on it,
Yeah.
And the fact that it was so easy for me, I was in beginning band for about 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And they moved me to the advanced band on my first day.
Wow.
And it was like, when they took me out of class, said, go back to class. You're not going to be in the beginning band. You're going to go to the advanced band on the day after tomorrow. I thought I had screwed up. I went back to class. I said, God, I've only had the horn for one day. I'm in trouble already. You know, what's I didn't understand anything about what was going on, you know, but I've tried. Well, I will say that when I went to advanced band on Saturday morning, they had already been organized, and there was myself and a clarinet player who had to audition, and they put a bigger piece of music in front of me, and I missed only 2 notes on the thing, and I got second chair in the advanced band on my first day, you know. And everybody thought I was a past life trumpet player. They thought I was Bix Beiderbecke or something like that. You know, I was, no. But I've tried to go back and look at something because the family that I grew up in, I grew up in my grandmother's house and so forth. They liked music. Yeah. But it was mostly the great Caruso and Mario Lanza and opera, things like that, and symphony orchestra. And I had one uncle who was an engineer for the Santa Fe Railroad, who was a real classical music freak. Oh. And in America back in those days, we're talking in 1941, 42, around in there, in those early days, they had a show out of New York. It was called the Bell Telephone Hour, which was, I think it was a New York Philharmonic that played an hour on radio. There was no television, and television didn't exist at that point. But they would always put that show on. It came on a Sunday evening, and so I'm laying there in a diaper, like 1, 2, 3 years old, listening to the New York Philharmonic, you know. Wow. And they would sometimes play 78 records. They were mostly like, you know, Guy Lombardo, Wayne King, kind of, you know, cornball, nothing really jazz. But the closest there was 178 of Harry James Band that was on, that I heard a few times, you know. Yeah. But what I'm getting at is there was a lot of input to me in my ears as a kid. I was in an environment that wasn't fully music, but it was there. Yeah. I think this is one of the things that helps create the potential or possibility of a life in music is an environmental kind of a situation, you know. And if you grow up in a situation where there's music around you, and I guess not everybody reacts to music. So there would be some people that would lay on that diaper, on that floor in the diaper, and not like what the music was doing. Yeah, not acknowledge it. Yeah. But the thing about music is that it's a very spiritual kind of thing, and the responses in human beings have to do with the vibrations of the music and so forth. I mean, there's an awful lot of books written about this and a lot of theories about it and so forth, and I try to read all of them I can, you know. But music was here before verbal language. Yeah. And it was music, that inner kind of seeking, that finding your voice or solving a mystery of some sort, you know. Yeah. And back in the pre-Neanderthal days and all that kind of stuff, you know, if you saw a rabbit run by, you didn't know what it was, whether it was going to kill you or whatever, or you didn't know what a cloud was or an apple on a tree. You know, the fear was there. So there's an introversion kind of thing that happens with people when they have a little bit of fear. So if you go inside and go, and these were the first kind of sounds that came. And then the other thing is that people in those primordial days were imitating animal sounds and birds and things of that sort. Huh. This is what made them start to outflow kinds of concepts, which now we're looking at what's happened to music. Now all we're worried about is Grammys and stuff, you know. I mean, it's like really gone completely reversed. Yeah. You know, and I think the average musician doesn't even have any knowledge about the historical origins of music. They don't know anything about how it relates to language and stuff like that. But it is about a communication process, you know?
Yeah.
And so one thing about it is that, like, I was always very sensitive to music as a kid. And even Conte Candoli wrote on liner notes. I asked him to write some liner notes on one of my albums years and years ago. And I didn't know what he was going to write, but one of the things he said is something about, one of the things about Bobby's playing is his extreme sensitivity, you know, to music and so forth. He spotted that in me, you know, and we used to hang out and play together and so forth, you know, a lot. And I love the guy greatly, you know, but I was shocked when he said that. You know, how does he see that? Well, you know, I don't see who I am. You know,
of course. You can only hear from third party, really, in a way. Yeah, that makes sense.
But anyway, you know, people have asked me, like, tried to ask me, how did you get started and what happened? Why are you this? And why could you play gigs at 12 years old? And why could you I didn't have to study improvisation. I mean, I just put it up there and I could hear and feel music, which brings me to a point about are there natural gifts for a musician? You know, I mean, what constitutes?
Maybe that's a good thing to talk about, because I've been thinking about this a little recently too.
There's one thing I would say. I realized this quite a long time ago, that there's two gifts that you would hope for that lead to the better possibilities of success as a musician, especially in the creative field. One of them is a good relative pitch ear, not perfect pitch.
Yeah.
Perfect pitch can be a very negative issue in a very imperfect world that we live in, you know? Yeah. I mean, it's impossible, as you probably know, it's impossible to build musical instruments perfectly in tune. And on this planet, in this world, you can't do it because of the tempered scale, you know? We've had, if you go back and could hear the pre-tempered scale, the overtones were so out of alignment, it was ridiculous, and it sounded god-awful, you know? But you know, the point about relative pitch is great, because you can, if you want to play God Save the Queen, you can play it, you pick any note and you can play the tune in any key, you know? And that's a good relative pitch ear. So that ear thing is the first and foremost thing.
Yes.
Second, but equally as important, is an inner sense of rhythm, where you don't have to count 4 beats in a bar. Yeah. Or you don't have to sit there and go,
like an ability to dance, right? Almost dance, yeah.
And a little more specific about that is, like, to me, I got into a discussion with a couple of people on this, one of which was Sonny Fortune. We did a tour together in Europe, mostly in the United Kingdom. Many years ago, probably in the 80s or something like that, you know?
Yeah.
And Sonny's a great player, unusual character, but we get to talking about the importance of the drummer in the rhythm section, you know? Yeah. And he says, nah, it's not the drummer, it's the bass player, you know? And I realized that, yeah, he's right. It's the bass is the one that, if you have a really good bass player, you don't need a drummer, because the feel is in the bass too.
Huh.
You dig? Most drummers think they're the most important guy on the bandstand, but it's the bass player. It really is. And so, like, when I'm relating to music, I can feel the rhythm inside of myself. And it's not hearing it. You know, when you listen to a rhythm section, you're late.
Huh.
When a bass player goes punk and you go, oh, psh, you're late. It might be only a microsecond, but you're late. You have to be in the moment with the bass player.
Yeah, this is the connection thing.
One of the things that I do with students and stuff like that, you know, is try to get them to hear and feel better. It's not just that piece of paper and don't miss a note kind of thing, you know.
Yeah.
That's what screws most people's lives up, is the fear of missing notes, you know, this big mistake. Oh my God, you know, and people will hate me and they won't like me and all that. Forget people. Just get inside of yourself, you know, and find So when I do with students, I don't like to use metronomes because they're too mechanical.
Okay.
But with a lot of people, I have a lot of students who have come to me that you could drop a bowling ball on the floor next to them and they wouldn't hear it, you know.
Wow.
And you know, so what I do is I use a metronome with the really more southern sorts of flares, you know.
Okay.
And I'll set a metronome about 120 on a half, you know, like click, 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 and then they have to sing a bass line. Well, even if they just sing one note, boom, 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 bing, boom, 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 and then I have them do just part of a scale, boom, doo, dee, doo, doo, dee, dee, doo. You know, they have to do that. And then I keep advancing it a little bit until they go up a scale up to a ninth and back down again. And then I turn the metronome off and they have to internalize it.
That's nice.
They have to keep it in there, you dig?
Yeah.
I did this at a drum clinic up in Oregon many years ago. And at the microphone, there was probably 500 drummers. It was a big drum conference of some sort, you know, at a college. And I sat up there and on the microphone, I sang a bass line, and then I would do boom, doo, dee, dee, da, 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 boom, dee, 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 da, boom. So I combined the bass and the drums as one instrument, like this, you know. And I did this on the microphone. I had them close their eyes. And feel it with me, you know, and do it. And then I stopped singing and I said, hold on to it, keep it, hang in there, you know. And some of them would immediately lose it, but others would keep with it. And then I would have them, okay, open your eyes and keep singing and sing the bass line to me. And it was like, blah, 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 blah. You know,
wow.
It was all over the place, but you got 500 guys there. I mean, you know, you can't expect them all to be like perfect kind of so. Yeah. But you see that those are the kind of things that people think, oh, that's just for jazz. No, it's not. If you're playing Baroque music, if you're playing Baroque music or anything, polkas, or I don't care what, the bass is the focal center of everything you do rhythmically, you know. You can add all of the drums and guitars and timpanis and everything else on top of that, but the bass thing has to be the one center for everybody. You know?
Do you play drums, Bobby?
A little bit, yeah. I started at 14 on drums.
Yeah, so I started drums before trumpet, and I'm really drum sensitive.
Me too.
And like really drum sensitive. And it makes me think that you talking about the bass. I probably don't listen to the bass enough because I'm so drum sensitive and I'm so excited about what's going to happen with the drums. And yeah, that's really interesting. I'm going to spend a bit more time thinking about that now and make sure that I'm locked in with that, because there's a lot of so-called noise happening with the drums, a lot of other stuff that is that you need to push to the side to get to the root of the time. You know, with the bass, it's just there, right?
Well, one thing too, I've had quite a few drum students over the years. You know, they come to me they know that I play a little. I mean, I'm not really a Buddy Rich or a Billy Higgins or anything like that, you know. Yeah. And especially now after all the surgeries and all the metal parts in my body and everything like that, it's very difficult for me to maintain the physical aspects of playing the drums, you know. Yeah. But the thing that I do with drum students is that I make them sing the bass line and then add the ride cymbal to the bass line. They have to sit there and go, ba-ding, ding, ding, ding. And even if I don't have them do a stick, I just have them put their hand in the air and pretend there's a cymbal there. You just bang, doo, dee, 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 boom, ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-dum. You dig what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that, you know, I think any type of when you're trying to become a musician, the ears and the rhythm they're like so important, because other than that, you could just become an instrumentalist. You could be a horn player. I know an awful lot of the trumpet players that couldn't swing if you hung them from the tallest tree in town,
Yeah.
It's that whole feeling, of the music that makes you not a violin player, but makes you a musician. Not a saxophone player, but a musician,
Yeah. It's a connection to the actual music itself, right? Rather than just the ability to play the instrument.
And one of the things about jazz music is because it's not a matter of being perfect with not missing any notes in an orchestra or something like that, That whole thing about it's so uptight kind of a situation but it comes from our education system, which is a travesty, in my opinion. There's an awful lot of exceptions to it, and there are some really good situations going on here and there around the world. But for the most part, the origins of the music education system has a great deal to do with perfection, and even back in the days of Europe of the courts and everything, if a visiting king and queen were there, and the trumpeter got up to play a fanfare, and he clammed a few notes in there, they would cut his head off.
Amazing. Taken to the Tower of London.
There was a thing. The thing at ITG years ago, there was a whole disclosure of some articles about the beheading of trumpet players for bad performance. That's going to make you nervous, I guess. Well,
I think playing lead trumpet anyway is it's a pretty crazy thing. It's a pretty crazy thing to do, right? There's nowhere to hide. You just have to have thick skin, and you've got to do your best. What would you do to change the education system, Bobby? Like, what do you think would be more effective?
Well, there's a whole lot of items on that list, but the first one word I would say is internalization.
Okay.
Because it's too much visual rather than, and what I do I have a few students, 10, 11, 12 years old. When I've got a little kid that's just a beginner in Ames, Iowa. He's 10 years old, and he's had 4 lessons, half-hour lessons with me. But what I make him do is memorize. Okay. So that he gets himself away from the paper. I want him to use the visual entry point of the left hemisphere in his brain to look and sight and see and read. But if I have him play ba-da-da-da-da, I'll have him play it 5 or 6 times, and then I'll have him close his eyes and play it, see if he can remember it.
Yeah.
And if he misses any, I say, open your eyes and see what you missed, and play it a couple times, and then go back, close your eyes. So that internalization process means that he starts to own the music inside of himself. Person who plays, whether it's a lead player or a jazz player or a violin player in an orchestra, if the music is inside of them, they're going to perform it much better.
Yes.
More it comes from them rather than from the paper. And as long as they're looking at the paper and watching the baton of the conductor, there's a certain, their butt cheeks a little bit tighter together on that.
I was practicing some Clark 2 this morning inside my academy. And
Clark?
Just Clark 2, So whatever, and I got down to low A, all right? And I was reading it because I was doing it with other people. So I didn't need to read it, but I was reading it because I needed to keep track of where I was so that other people could also play. And I just couldn't play the A major Clark 2 when I was looking at it. I had to close my eyes to do it because I think the distraction of sort of following it just did something to my third finger or something weird, But I can see what you mean, definitely.
Well, there's definitely a difference between the two hemispheres in the brain, and the left one is they're both actually active, it seems, at most all times. But becomes a dominance based on whatever. And one of the keys to that is closing your eyes, because when you close your eyes, all of a sudden you see better.
Makes sense.
In a sense.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
Because you're sensing it from the inner ear.
Yep.
You know, the music is inside of you, and it's coming from you going outward. When you look at it from the paper, it goes from the paper to your eye. Then you have to try to play it from the left eye, from the left hemisphere without missing a note, because the dominance in the left hemisphere is the amygdala, which is like a fear kind of a thing.
I had exactly these issues a couple of years ago where I know exactly what you're talking about. The fear is associated with that side of things. It's the calculation, right? It's not the feel. Yeah. So you just calculate everything. You don't just do it.
Plus, all of the music is in the right hemisphere. You know, that's where your emotions really are. That's where you want to.
Do you advocate for, when you're transcribing a solo, to do it off the paper? So you would obviously learn it into your fingers without looking at any music. You don't even transcribe it down to the writing. You just listen to the record, play along with the record, and then if you want to afterwards, you can write it down. Is that the way that you would suggest doing it?
Yeah, what I did when I was a kid, when I started buying records and listening to records all the time, yeah. And I never transcribed a solo physically and wrote it down. Yeah. Well, I won't use the word never there, because there was a time when Chuck Finley and I did an album together, and I did some transcriptions of Clifford Brown solos. Yeah. Brownie Speaks and Joy Spring, and Chuck and I played his solos unison, on the album. But I did those physically. But when I was a kid, like 12, 13, 14 years old, my parents would put me to bed way too early always. Yeah. But I had a record player, and this is back in the days of LPs, you see. So I had a record player right near my bed, and I would pull the speakers over and set one on each side of my pillow. Yeah. And I would stack maybe 4 LPs on there, Stan Kenton or something like that, or whatever. And Stan Getz and things like that. And what I would do is I'd lay there in the dark in bed, and I'd know these solos. Conte Condoli's solos were a lot of them that I listened to. And the other guy was Don Fagerquist with the Les Brown Band, Yeah. And so I knew their solos pretty well, and I would lay in bed and I would finger them as I was listening to them. I would finger along with their solos, Well, that's a term. That's a term you don't know. Idiokinetic. Do you know this?
Nice. No.
Idio means idea, and kinetic energy means like everything you do, from brushing your teeth or scratching your butt. It's all kinetic energy, kinesthesia. A lot of people call it muscle memory, but what it is, it's neuromuscular, because the neurons in the brain are what send like messages down to the muscles and tell them what to do. When I was on Woody Herman's band, we did a 3-week tour in Europe, a George Wein festival tour, and it was Woody's band and John Coltrane's quartet, Jimmy McGriff's trio, and Nina Simone's trio. And the 4 groups toured together for 3 weeks. And so I was living in New York in those days, and I was an absolute fanatic for John Coltrane's music. This is 1965, and to be on the same airplane, I used to take pictures. I got a whole bunch of pictures I took of John Coltrane, and just sitting across from him and one seat, one row behind him on the airplane. Well, he had a thing that he used to practice. He had like a way of fingering, like on a stick. It was not a saxophone, but he'd sit there and whatever he was singing in his mind, he would finger it. Well, that's idiokinetics. Huh. There was a piano teacher by the name of Luigi Bonpensier that lived in New York and he wrote a book. Well, he didn't write the book. After he died, some of his students put together the book of his teachings. But he used to have you, when you were having difficulty on the keyboard, he would show you the fingering, and you would lift your fingers up above the keyboard and go, doodle-dee-la, doodle-dee-la, doodle-dee-la. You do it repetitively. That's a form of neuroplasticity. So you would do it on here, and then you would put your hand down. With your eyes closed, you would do this fingering, and put your hands on the piano, and you could play the shit out of it. Just like that. Yeah. You would play it. you're teaching the neuromuscular pattern in the muscles and the nerves. Then you put it on the keyboard. You see.
Yeah.
So with the trumpet, one of the things I like to do with students is, ba da 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 da. They have to ba da 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 or something like that. Ba da 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 da. Sing it. Yeah. Then sing it and finger it while you sing it, and then play it. Yeah. So the kid go do da da, and then he goes, and next thing you know, he's internalized the whole thing. So he's connecting his inner voice and his outer voice, even what is singable thing. He's connecting it to the instrument. And these are kind of what you asked me about changing the educational system. You see that internalization thing brings back to that. That's what you want to do, is get the music inside of a person, not on that music stand. Yeah. The music stand serves its purpose and the entry point.
So I had a student inside my academy again who was asking what he should play, and he said, "Have you got any music for me to play?" And I said to him, "Well, what's your favorite song? What's your favorite song?" I said, "Oh, well, this song, this pop song, whatever." And I said, "Oh, cool. Well, just play that." And he was like, "Well, I don't know how." So we'll just listen to it and then just figure out the first note and figure out the next note and then try and play along and see what happens. And he did it, and he came back to me and he said, "Wow, it was amazing that you didn't just give me the thing to play to try, because all of a sudden I had this new skill that I hadn't even thought was even there." He just, for his whole life, just been told, play this. And so you just play that. Never even considered that he could take music down in and then learn it that way. And then I said, hey, then just change a key. That might sound overwhelming right now, but once you got it down, it's just intervals, right? It's just intervals, So
did the wise thing with that, I mean, even there's so much to say about this area, which we're talking about. This is, I'm sorry, there's your long list of questions.
Forget the questions. The questions are there to hook on if we need them. This is way more interesting.
Well, see, the thing about it is, as I said earlier, if a person practices without emotion, they're going to learn to play without emotion. They're going to be very instrumental, not musical. It's just all like mechanical. Driving a car is mechanical, and you want to keep your eyes open when you do that. This is a very wise thing. There's a time and place to do things when you're doing language or you're doing your math, balancing your checkbook and things like that. Mm-hmm. You want to have those eyes open,
Yeah.
But you don't necessarily need to make love with your eyes open, I mean, wait a minute. What do you
it's funny. It's really funny you should say this, because when I was at Purcell School, the head of jazz there, it's a fantastic teacher called Simon Colum, piano teacher. And he said to me, we would talk about certain trumpet players, and he'd go, "Oh yeah, he's very eyes closed." I said, "Okay." He's like, "Well, yeah, no, he's very eyes open." And at the time, I remember thinking, really? Okay, eyes closed, eyes open. I think I understood what he was getting at, but maybe at the time I didn't agree. But now I think I do, because I think the eyes open people, the motivations aren't always the same as people with the eyes closed. Does that make sense?
It does. And see, one of the things is, when I do this and I ask people to do it, one of the things that's necessary is a real decent, very good explanation of why. Yeah. So that, there has to be a reason that's sensible for things that you do. I tell my students and friends, if you take a lesson with some teacher and he tells you to do something, then you should say, well, what's the purpose of that? Yes. If he can't explain it to you, don't do it. Yes. But even with a 10-year-old kid, like when I ask him to play a C scale, I'll show him this picture. I'll say, play it this way, and now play it that way.
That's great.
See, the thing about it is that I used to do this at clinics, and people used to laugh at me, but one of the things I studied an awful lot of psychology in school, in high school and university and so forth. And then Mark Twain used to say, never let school interfere with your education, you know?
Yeah.
So I continue to read an awful lot of stuff about the left and right brain and how they works and how the learning process occurs. I'm trying to just understand better, you know?
Yeah.
But when I would do clinics, sometimes I would talk about this need for playing with emotion. I say, like, let's say you're going to go into the room and practice and you want to learn that F-sharp scale, you know? Okay, so just before you sit down, you look out the window and you say, oh my God, there's my cat in the driveway. Oh, it's dead. Somebody killed my cat. Oh no, I love that cat. Now play the F-sharp scale. Oh, sad. Yeah. Oh, I'm so sad. I love that. Play the F-sharp scale with that emotion. You see, it's going to be slow and sorrowful and everything. And then you say, you know, it's that neighbor of mine. He thinks he owns the highway. This guy drives too fast all the time. It's that some bitch. I'm going to kill him. Now play the F-sharp angry scale, you know? And you say, oh, wait a minute, that's not my cat. Now you play the happy scale, you see? Yeah. So I would do this in a clinic and lecturing to people, and they would go, that's some silly shit. I said, yeah, of course it's silly, but one of the things about it, I do it in a humorous way to get the point across that there's three simple emotions. Do you think you could manage to do that? Now, I want to add to this a very important thing. You know who Tim Higgins is, perhaps, of course, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Tim, I heard Tim play with Stan Kenton's band when he was 19 years old. And I was watching him and I thought, boy, this guy's got some screwball amateur problems, you know? And I didn't meet him then, but every time he'd put the horn up, he'd be in a different place on his mouth. He'd move it around. He was trying to find a setting, you know? Yeah. Years later, I got to meet him. He walked up, and I was playing in a club in Cincinnati, and the drummer, John Von Ohlen, said, would you mind if this kid, Tim Hagen, sits in with you? And I said, no, of course not. So he came up, and we became really good friends. He eventually took some lessons with me and so forth. Not lessons about music, but lessons about his chops and things, breathing and so forth. But one of the things about Tim and why I want to put this in here is that Tim had a thing, I don't know, I think partially he was born with a tendency towards this because he's a little, you know, he's got his own pathway kind of thing, as we all do. But he learned some of this from Thad Jones, too. He played on Thad Mell's band in New York and so forth. But it's called playing free. And what you do is Tim gets a good warm-up, and he puts the horn up to his mouth, and the first thing that pops into mind, he plays it. The next thing that pops into mind, he plays it. There's no bar lines, there's no rules, there's no key signatures, there's no tempo markings. Whatever pops into your mind. If you see a car going down the highway and crashing into a bunch of school kids, you got to play that.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah.
Whatever. If you see two rhinoceroses making love in the zoo, you have to play it.
Okay.
Whatever pops into your head, you cannot edit it. And the thing is, you don't know what's going to come out of there, but you have all of these files that are stashed way back inside of your mind from the input, all the records you've listened to, all the experiences you've had. There's massive amounts of information in there. Yeah. What's going to come to the surface? Who knows why? What comes? It can be just the mood you're in. It can be how you slept. It could be what you had for breakfast. Yeah. It could be whatever. But you cannot edit it. And so sometimes when I do this every day, I learned it really from Tim. You know, he's been doing it since he was a kid. And what happens is, what it starts to do is it frees you up from editing your playing. Like a lot of us edit our playing so that people will like it. You might think of something and say, oh shit, they will never like that. You know, I better play five. I'll play a high note. They'll love that, you know. Yeah. Well, what are you doing? That's not the way to play, for crying out loud. You know, that's, you don't play to please people. You play to please yourself. To find your own voice. That's the most important thing. If people happen to like what you've found in your voice, good for you, you know?
Yeah.
But the origins of music, as we spoke about earlier, being more spiritual and everything, have a great deal more to do with the person finding their own voice.
Yes.
Who are you? Don't copy Freddie Hubbard. I mean, don't copy Miles Davis. One of each of those guys is enough.
Yeah.
And I think that in the learning process, in the early stages, when it's first of all a mystery, and then there's that period of time where it's the jungle of knowledge and stuff like that, where you have to listen to all these recordings, Chet Baker and everybody, to find out what this music sounds like. You're inputting files,
yes,
and licks and things, whatever.
Yeah.
But eventually you start to personalize those things, and you let go of the Chet Baker, and you let go of the Miles Davis, and you let go of Bobby Hackett or whoever. I mean, do you let go and you start to find the confidence in your own voice, and you're using. If you took 10 players, Dizzy Gillespie and Miles and Freddie and whatever, and you put them all and gave them all the same lick to play, no two of them would play it the same way. And if you turned your back on them, you should be able to identify which one was Dizzy and which one was Miles and which was Freddie. And
I've been on tour at the moment with two of my favorite trumpet players, James Copus and Jim Davison, and we've been doing a lot of driving together. We've been having a lot of fun. And we just started a new game where James Copus, who is a crazy wealth of internet trumpet knowledge, as well as trumpet knowledge in general, knows every single internet trumpet video of every single person. And we play Guess the Trumpet Player. And I think this is a great game. I might even play this inside the academy, to be honest. But we just play a trumpet player, and he's sitting in the back of the car, and he's just playing the trumpet player behind. And between me and Jim, we have to try and figure out who it is. Now, sometimes it's really easy, or we've seen the video before, but sometimes it can be quite difficult. And James has got some cool recordings that either we haven't heard before or we can't quite figure out. It's sometimes more difficult to tell with classical players, even if they're playing the same tune, because at least with jazz players, you have the language as well that you can kind of discern from. But it's a really fun game.
Well, I'd like you to meet this guy someday, but I'm not going to, because I'm not coming over there. I love hearing about people like that, because there are some, there's a bit of fanaticism, you might call it, I
think one needs to be a certain amount obsessed, right?
Well, to some degree, the word fan comes from fanatic,
Yeah, makes sense.
And, but you see, the thing about it, you can, in my case, we're talking about some of what goes on in my life, that I'm fanatical about jazz music. I like other kinds of music. I mean, I listen to Australian didgeridoo players and African pygmies tribes and all kinds of stuff. I want to hear the cultures of the world.
I guess maybe the why question, maybe, and again, we may just go off and explore somewhere else when I ask this, but I'm interested exactly in why you like, or why you're interested in it. Can you explain that? Is it just something you're interested in? Just happens to be?
It's almost like I have no choice.
Okay.
It's just such a strong, powerful element in my life. It's the one thing that I wake up and live for every day of my life. I have a wonderful wife, and a beautiful daughter.
Yeah.
My wife is very knowledgeable about music. She doesn't play a musical instrument. She was a very famous dancer when she had a career. But my wife heard Clifford Brown play live a couple of times, and I never did. She used to sneak, when she was 13 years old, in the Boston area, she was sneaking into jazz clubs, listening to jazz all the time, and she grew up in an area with a lot of good musicians, even jazz trumpet player Paul Fontaine, who was on Woody Herman's band. They're from the same little town, Lynn, Massachusetts, and he's the one that introduced me to her, in a sense, and I met her the day I got out of the Army and joined the Tommy Dorsey band, and I bumped into her backstage and spilled a drink on her. I went, "Holy crap, what you clumsy oaf," and
and the rest is history.
I went out and we took it out in the hallway in the light to help her clean up the mess. I looked at her, and she was absolutely gorgeous, and I went, "Oh my God." And then I went, wait a minute, is your name Lisa by any chance? And she said, how did you know that? I said, Paul Fontaine told me to look you up if I ever got to Vegas. And she said, oh, that little shit. You know? I said, I love her already, you know.
Oh,
we call ourselves the Blues Suede Shoes.
very good. Very good. I like it.
You know, but anyway, I like what we're getting at is my intense love of music is I cannot put the horn down. I tried one time. I had so much. I was playing so incorrectly. I was cutting my chops. I've got a lot of scars on my lip from cutting. I played way up in the red like this, and Buddy Rich's band, I spurted blood all over the parts. And Buddy came and hugged me, and he said, "Oh, you bled for me," you know. No, I didn't bleed for you, you son. But anyway. But, you know, the thing about it is that I tried to quit playing in let's see, what year was that? About 67, somewhere around in there. Yeah, I was really bleeding and had a double hernia.
You tried to quit in 67?
Well, after I left Buddy's band and a couple of things in there, I just had to get off the horn for a while, you know, and I just didn't know if I was going to be able to come back. I had studied a little bit towards architecture in college, you know, and I was thinking about doing that as a career, but I'm glad I didn't do it because I wouldn't want to be sitting in an office designing, you know, rectangular buildings for the lowest bidder, you know, stuff like that. But when I was growing up, the music education system, there was no jazz in this, and jazz education didn't exist in those days.
Okay.
So, if you thought about being a musician, they would say, "Oh, you're going to be a band director," and I went, "No, I don't want to do marching bands and stuff, you know, and Christmas parades and Easter parades and all that shit, you know. I didn't really do that, you know." I mean, but people were discouraging careers in music, you know.
Okay.
And if you thought you wanted to be a jazz musician, oh my God, you're going to waste your life on that. I mean, You'll never make it. You know, and that was the whole attitude back in those days. Jazz was.
How much do you think the reason you succeeded was because of those people? Sometimes I think that I really pushed through was because of the doubt that people showed. I don't know whether you felt that.
Well, I've always been a little bit of a rabble rouser. Even I was a rebellious type of a kid in many ways too, you know.
I think most lead trumpet players are, Bobby.
Well, I was not a lead player. I was not a lead player, but I was I was first chair in all the school bands and all state band and everything. Even I was in the youth orchestra here in Albuquerque when I was 14 or something like that, you know.
Yeah.
And when I got to a rehearsal early one day and I was playing a little bit of bebop, and the orchestra conductor, who was a Viennese viola player, walked in and heard me playing jazz and threw me out of the orchestra for playing jazz. He says, "We can't have this type of a musician in the orchestra." What? Like I'm like some sort of an evil, you know, like a zombie or something like that, you know, because I play jazz. And see, one of the things, back to the travesty of the educational system, there's no creativity in it. You see, when we're talking internalisation, you know, I would, like the thing I was telling you about Tim Higgins and playing free and stuff like that, I would, and this, like that, you know, just get in this mood and play something that feels like zippity doo dah, you know. Are you in Disneyland? Play or whatever, you know.
This is really interesting that you're saying this right now, because there I am thinking about syllabuses and things like that. And I think that generally people, what they think they want is to be given an answer to a problem that they have. So I have this issue, and then like, how do I fix it? And usually it's process-based, right? But I keep finding myself in the position that you're talking about at the moment, which is, well, a lot of the time, honestly, the problem is a creative or an emotional issue. It's less of a logistical or a calculable or structural or technical issue, because this gets fixed when this is right. So when the emotion and those things are right, then everything else gets better. Like, for example, when my trumpet playing went a bit south for a while, it happened at the same time that I was maybe at my lowest point. And then
You mean mentally south or physically or both?
Both. But I thought, oh, when the trumpet gets better, I'll be happy again. And it was ironic because the trumpet only really started to get better again when I figured out why I was doing all these things. And we had a little talk about that before. But that's the problem, is people, they come with a problem and they need a fix for something. But the problem is usually somewhere else. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, one thing you have to always remember, too, is that the mind is senior to the body. And if there's something going on incorrectly with your relationship with the spiritual side of music, if you're not really enjoying, if that joy factor is not really like a dominant thing in your life, if you're just dealing with the job, I think it starts to affect the way your body responds to the physical needs in playing the instrument. Your breathing will get shallow. You will not be directing like the same sort of neuromuscular patterns into the chop muscles in your face, or even in your hands and arms and stuff with the fingering patterns and stuff. The minute you get into a negative thing, you lose dopamine, which is like one of the strong elements in the positive woohoo kind of thing.
Especially if what you're trying to do is lay it on, right? On the horn, you need to be giving, sometimes you need to have 100% there. And if you emotionally can't give 100%, then one thing that I want to say about that, what you're saying is, I hope we can say it right. Yeah.
If there's a must-have in your situation, it works against you.
Yes. That's it. Yes. And this is the thing. This is the thing about being pro, is that if you have to make the results, you will make it, but you might not make it the right way. And then you end up possibly spiraling negatively because you have to make the thing. Whereas if you're making it because for a different reason, then it will happen.
Yeah, I wrote an article a long time ago called "Playing for the Right Reason," and it has to do with what you're talking about there. It's there's three options for the time element. There's future, past, or right now. And if you're playing for the future, like, God, I hope I'm doing an album, I want it to be really good, maybe get a Grammy nomination, and the people will really love it, and I'll make so much money on it, I'll be famous, and what the hell are you doing? That you're working against yourself. You might as well be hitting yourself in the head with a fucking hammer. On that, you're actually going against the natural flow of the moment. If you play in the present moment, in the moment, you're going to play your best, and it's going to be for the right reason. I wrote a thing many years ago, a realization, and I did it as a big kind of a poster, and people I've sent it around. A lot of people have seen it, and a lot of guys framed it and put it in their office, for the students to read. It's even on some band room walls, and it says, over the years of teaching and playing, I realized there's two things you can do with music. You can either impress people or you can touch people. So when you put the instrument up to your body, think about what your intention is. What is your need? Do you need to be liked? If you need to be liked, you need to find a psychiatrist and sit down with them a little bit and spend some time in Couch Canyon.
Well,
but you can follow this, and this is so common. We see this all the time. People are out there trying to get first chair. They want to be this. They want to win this. It's auditions. The nerves are driving them crazy when they audition for a job and stuff. I would, to me, I just show up and play and try to. I don't give a shit whether people like my playing or not.
Yeah.
Especially now.
That will make you play better, like a lot better, right?
It does. You see, the thing is, there's an awful lot of expansion in it, but it starts with the self. If you play for yourself, your family will like your playing, and your friends will like your playing, and then all of the trumpet players will like your playing, and the world will like your playing, and all the animals will like your playing, and the cows will come up and knock on your door and so forth. And you're expanding from inside of yourself. You don't work out here when this is not straight. And that's what's happened in the business. All of the years that I did studio work in LA, I was working 15 to 20 sessions a week, and that was great. I was making good money, but I didn't play 8 measures of anything that was worth remembering. I was doing $6 Million Man, Love Boat, Mark and Mindy, Bob Newhart's show, Mary Tyler Moore, all the list is like ads, and you don't get any royalties from that stuff. Yeah. And in the reruns, you don't get royalties from it. And you're sitting there and I'm trying to please these stupid contractors, and fixers, we call them, but it's you're trying to please these people.
It's hard, isn't it? Because when you take the leap to pay your mortgage or your rent with your passion, there's a conflict. So you are forced into having to learn this, whatever it looks like.
There's a transition in it too, Louis, is that when I was first starting to get called to do things like that, I was very, wow, they're calling me to do all these things. I'm so pleased. I mean, I couldn't believe that, people liked my playing enough to keep calling me. The contractors were calling me, and everybody was pleased. And I was thrilled at first by it, and I was I was happy. I thought, wow, build up my confidence. But then after a while, it got to where it was just boring, and I would make $2,000 or $3,000 in a day playing television shows and stuff like that.
Okay, can I ask you about the period of time immediately after the realization of this? What happened? Do you remember? Why? What made you make the leap?
I have to be very careful to tell you the story because I don't want to use the names.
Please don't use any names.
Well, it starts, a lot of what happened with me when I was on Woody Herman's band. One of the guys that I used to sit in the back of the bus and get high with was Sal Nistico, the great tenor player,
Yeah.
And he was like an amazing player, as you probably know. And we used to sit back there and we had a little battery-operated record player and we'd listen to Charlie Parker and stuff like that, and we'd talk about, wouldn't it be great to learn to be a really good jazz musician someday, and I just hope I can learn to play really well, someday, and we talked about that as a primary goal in life was not to be rich, not to drive a fancy car, not to be famous, but to play well.
Yeah.
That was the goal. And so Sal disappeared, lived in Italy for some years. He came back to LA and he played in a club called Carmelo's for 4 nights. I went in to hear him 2 nights in a row. And I came home and I went, what the hell am I doing? We used to talk about playing. He did it, and I'm sitting here playing Mark and Mindy, And I went in and I poured a cognac, and I went in the den in the dark room in my house. My family was all asleep already, and I sat in there and drank that cognac, and I thought about, what am I doing? I mean, here I was going to play, and now I'm out here picking daisies out in the pasture, Yeah. And I decided right then and there to retire from the studios. That night, I finished that cognac, and I said, that's it. No more.
Wow.
No more. And
Did you have anything to latch onto other than just your raw ability and the odd people that you were going to be working with? Because obviously there is a transition, right, out of that world.
Yeah, I started doing some little guest appearances in schools and things back in the 60s, late 60s and stuff, clinics and things, guest appearances and stuff. And I always loved that when I go out of town and sit with a high school band or a college band someplace and meet people and play and, have pizza with the kids afterwards and talk. And they'd ask me questions about Woody Herman or Benny Goodman or somebody like that, and then you come back and I love the guys I was sitting next to in the studios. I mean, there's John Odino and Chuck Finley and, and Bud Shank and all these great players, I mean, it was great. But what I did at that moment, I realized that I had gone off course. Huh. I had a pathway in my life, a desired pathway, and all of a sudden the notoriety and the money and all of this and that started distracting me. Yeah. And so what I did is I honored what was in my book, my diary. I honored it, but I only accepted 2 other commercial gigs ever again after that. One of them was the piano player that used to play with me and Carl Fontana when we had a quintet was David Garfield, and he was producing an album for Smokey Robinson.
Okay.
And Smokey wanted a trumpet solo on this one tune. So David played some of my albums for him, and he said, "Oh, shit, yeah, I like that guy." So he brought me in there to play on his album. And I got to, hang with Smokey a bit, and he ended up having me play more and put some horn parts on and things like that, and he paid me really well. And then the other one was a Manhattan Transfer Christmas album that Johnny Mandel wrote, and Johnny insisted I be the lead player on the thing. And because Johnny, I had great respect for him and so forth, I did that. And those are the only 2 commercial gigs I've done since 1982.
Wow.
And that's when I retired from that stuff. And so I just focused on doing clinics. I wanted to do 2 things, was teach and play jazz. And that's the only 2 things I love to do. Wow. And that's what I've done ever since 1982. And it took a while to get my income back up to where it was in the studios. Yeah. But every dollar I made doing a clinic wasn't for the money. It was for, I had to provide and make my house payments and things, but I was doing it for the love of music and to help people. Gustav.
That's the one, to help people. Bang.
And Gustav Holst had a lecture that I read. He did a lecture at Yale University, and one of the things he said in the lecture was, and I've stated this at a lot of clinics, is that Gustav said, any person who achieves a reasonably good degree of success in music, in the arts, especially music, deserves to do a turnaround and help the next generation of people coming up. And to not do so is a crime of omission. And to not do so is a crime of omission hit me like a wet mop in the face. I went, God, and the little old lady needs help crossing the street and you don't help her? What the kind of person are you,
But not only that, of course, you wouldn't be in the position that you were in the first place if it wasn't for the previous generation having that mindset. So it's just the way that things are. But yeah, it's a responsibility that one must take upon themselves. Can I ask you a question about your time in the studio, just briefly? Because I keep hearing stories about you and Conrad Gozzo, and maybe the 1 or 2 times, I don't know how many times it was, I hear the stories third hand, and I just want to hear them from you. Like whatever.
There's only one story, and I was. It happened when I was in the Army. Okay. Actually, I was in this thing called the NORAD band, North American Air Defense, stationed in Colorado Springs. It was a very good band, and that's the band where Paul Fontaine was in with me and introduced me to my wife. And lots of great players were in that band, Yeah. Randy Allcroft, who wrote Breakfast Wine, all kinds of people. Anyway, we went to Hollywood to record some stuff. We're going to record some Billy May music. Yeah. And our colonel, Mark Azzolina, was a kind of a casual band singer at one point, and he knew all the musicians in L.A., but he got into the Air Force and became a big shot colonel and everything, but what he did is he invited Conrad Gozzo, Shelly Manne, and Buddy Collette to sit in with us on the recording session. So I got there, and in walks Conrad Gozzo, and he sits right next to me, and I'm going, oh my God. And we were doing Brassman's Holiday, if you've ever heard that ridiculous thing. Yeah. It's ridiculous, you know? Well, so I'm sitting there, you know, and I'm like a green 23-year-old kid or something like that, you know, and 22 maybe. And so I'm trying to keep up with Conrad Gozzo. Well, wait a second. No. I won't say what I was going to say there. But, you know, we did this thing, the first take on it, and the guys all went into the booth to listen to it. And what was happening is while I was trying to play, my horn felt like it had a box of Kleenex inside of it. It felt stuffy and it was a drag. I went, God, what's wrong with my horn? And one of the guys was this guy, Bobby Harriott, who was from Scotland originally and came to the States and Canada and everything. And Bobby used to play tricks. He'd put a matchbook or something in your water key and so forth to make it not play right for you. So they're in there. I'm checking my horn out, and I know everything's fine, and it played okay. And then we came out and did another take, and my horn stuffed up again. And I realized one thing. I went, what in the hell? And I backed off, and all of a sudden my horn was easier to play. Because I was trying to play at the same decibel level as Conrad Gozzo. And that guy was loud.
Yeah.
You know, he played on a Bach 10.5C, and his sound would go, you know, and I'm sitting there like this, and it just canceled out all the overtones off of my horn.
Yeah.
And what I realized about that is that what you do in a section is you don't match the decibel level of the lead player. You support him by getting underneath him and giving him the ambient space. But so if he's playing at 90 decibels, you get down to about 83 or 84 and give him that overtone space up there for ambience, you know? And I realized that, and I've taught that to a lot of people. But one of the things that happens especially at the amateur levels, when kids are growing up, you know, it's like, you're all supposed to play the same level? No, you're not. You're supposed to support the lead player by not competing with him. When you get a bunch of amateur trumpet players in a section, and this happens on any section, bones, saxes, whatever, when everybody's trying to play at the same dynamic level, you're interfering with each other's overtone series, and it creates like chaotic kind of negative responses. Like in the sax section, let the lead alto player have a little advanced space up there. You support him. Yeah. You don't, you know, and that
makes perfect sense.
So that was my Conrad Gozzo story. You know?
I love it.
And that was the one chance I got to sit next to the guy. And boy, did I learn something from that. I'm like, God almighty. I learned something that not only saved my career, but saved an awful lot of careers of other people who I've told to. You know, one of the points that I know about trumpet players, but it happens to all instruments, it happens to drummers too, is that if you don't hear yourself when you're playing properly, you're going to play until you do hear yourself. And the point with the trumpet, it's pointed, and the trombone is pointed away. You know, you're not out in front of it. And so I came up with a thing many years ago. I used to tour with Tom Jones, and I took Derek Watkins was originally Tom's lead player, and then Derek didn't want to do any more Tom and whatever, so I took his place with Tom. I did quite a while with Tom, and it was okay. But we were on tour, and we had a violin player by the name of Harry Urbant, who was 75 years old. I was 29, you know. Yeah. And every night when we're not playing on football fields and things like that, big, you know, gigantic soccer fields and everything. Yeah. And every night we'd be tuning up and everything, and Harry would tune up the string section, and then he would put cotton balls in his ears. And I was sitting in Maryland, Baltimore, Maryland, with him eating crab cakes and drinking one night. And Harry was like, you know, he had been the concertmaster on the NBC orchestra back when Del Staglers was in the orchestra, you know. So he's 75 years old. And loved to get out on the road with his wife and party and hang out and play and so forth. I said, Harry, I got a bone to pick with you. You and those cotton balls, you put them in there. Do we sound that bad, man? I mean, what is it with that shit, you know? And he said, oh, no, Bobby. No, you misunderstand. He says, look at this. This is Tom Jones tour. It's got all the rock and roll and all this. It's a 38-piece orchestra. Jeff Sturgis big band. This 8 custom amps, 6 foot tall behind the band. And look at my instrument. It's a little piece of wood with a bow. I can hardly hear it. I can't match all that electronics. He said, but when I play with the cotton balls in there, I can control my dynamics and my pitch because I can play by feel. I play by feel. Well, I knew a guy back in about that same period. I met this guy who was a bit of a scientist, and he designed a thing called a bone phone, which was instead of putting earphones on your ears, you put this thing around your neck, and it touched on the bones in your chest area. Wow. And you could listen to music and you could feel it inside your body. The whole resonance thing happened through the bones in your body. So you didn't have to plug up your ears. And so I went, wait a minute, it's play by feeling, not by hearing. So the next day, after Harry explained this to me, I remember we were in Waterford, Connecticut, and I went in out someplace, found a room, and I got a warm up, and I put a cotton ball in my left ear, which stimulates the right brain. Okay, because they work in opposite, you know. Left ear, right brain, right ear, left brain, okay? So I put a cotton ball in the left ear. Could use a little piece of a tissue or something like that. Doesn't have to be cotton, and so I played the same thing over and over again, the scale. And then I put a cotton ball in the other ear. I played the same scale over and over again. Well, you can't really hear all the overtones in the room when your ears are plugged up like that, but you can feel everything. It's if you just take your finger and put it in if you say, hello, 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 then you go, hello, 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 all of a sudden you're much more aware of your larynx and all those things. You can feel the note then you go, hello, hello, hello. Well, you can feel yourself saying that word. Yes. Well, when you do it on the trumpet, you get to where you're in the moment playing the trumpet right now in control of it, rather than depending on what bounces off the ceiling and comes back.
I'm very, very sensitive to this, and this studio in here is so dead, and I think that coincided also with going a little south on the instrument for a little while. Was that it's just like a battle every day, and then you try and create an ambience that doesn't even exist, right? Like so. You might be better off. I mean, I talked to Frank Brodel about this in a previous podcast, and also started doing it a little bit, plugging up and then putting cans on over in the studio, and then still feeling it and trying to kind of create that nasality inside and hear all of the ringing in the head rather than from what I get back from the room, especially if you're playing second or third trumpet. And you are trying to leave some space for the lead play. It stops you competing so much, Well,
one of the things when you do this drill, you need to do it more than once.
Yes.
It needs to be, because in any learning process, once you know the problem, then you know the solution. The next word is repetition.
Yeah.
And so every time in neuroplasticity, which is the process of relearning and making corrections in some bad habits, every time you do repetitions, all these dendrites and synapses and everything that come down from the neurons in your brain, they build up a substance called myelin, myelin. And myelin is you see an electric wire, it's got an insulation on it. That's the plastic or whatever. It builds up this myelin substance, and it takes dominance over your old habit. You can't go into the person's mind and take a pair of scissors or an eraser and wipe out a bad habit. You have to replace it with the correction. And so when you do these drills with the cotton balls repetitively, you don't spend all your life on it, but you do 10 or 15 minutes, maybe a couple of times a day or something like that.
Yeah.
And then it starts to become more stable inside of you.
Do you find that it's the thing that instills changes in your playing by doing that. So you're putting these in, and then you're practicing, and then it's that practice that's kind of seeping into the rest of the day. Then you take them out and you just play. Is that when you do your kind of work?
That's right. And what it really does, one of the most notable things that it does is it forces you to, it allows you, not forces you, but it allows you to back off a little bit instead of overblowing. Because most players, when they don't hear themselves well, they red line everything. They're trying to put a quart of water into a pint jar, you know.
Yeah, I do this all the time. Yeah, for sure.
Overblowing the horn, especially when going for the upper register. Lead players have a tendency to do this, and they, you know, the horn, depending upon a lot of the different aspects of the horn, there's so many, but you could start off with just saying bore size of the horn, you know.
Yeah.
And the larger bore horn requires more air to fill it up and activate the resonance in it, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, if you saw a nice Ferrari and you say, how do I like to have that Ferrari? How do I get one of those? He says, get a jar full of dollar bills and bring it to me. Well, get a small jar. He didn't say a big one.
Yeah.
Just get the smallest jar you can. The trumpet that I helped design for Yamaha, the Z trumpet, you know, is a medium bore horn, not even a medium large.
Yeah.
Because I used to play on a large bore equipment all the time, and I was working my butt off, you know. Yeah. I was getting hernias and huffing and puffing, and you know, you get on these bands and college bands, and they're overblowing, and you know, and holy crap, you know. And so,
tell me why does a medium bore, in your words, why? Because most people would think, well, if there's more space, then when I dump air into it, it will be free to go. So I won't have this overblowing sensation. Why does a medium bore help with this? Because
you don't need as much air. You don't need as much air to create the resonance in the instrument.
Okay.
Okay.
I guess that makes sense. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
In other words, what happens with a lot of people when they play on a horn, they overblow it and it backs up on them because you go forward with the air, but the air comes back at you as well, whether you know that or not.
Well, yeah, I've been thinking about this recently. If you've got the mouthpiece here and your lips are kind of coming in, if you blow harder, then the lips actually get pushed back at your teeth.
Well, it's a backdraft. You're going to get that. That's in physics anyway. But the point about it is that when you when you reduce the venturi and the size of the bore of the horn, you get response quicker.
Yes.
And so you don't have to force your airstream. You're not muscling so much like, you know.
Are you thinking when you play, I know obviously you have the wedge breath and all of these things, but are you thinking about just sighing the notes out generally? Is that, you try not to sighing the notes out? Are you trying to push? Or are you not trying to push? Or like, what's the philosophy behind engagement of? Well,
when you're learning to play an instrument, especially if you change a bore size, people who've been playing on, like Roger Ingram he just switched to the Z horn only a few days ago. He just bought one, and he can't believe how easy it is to play.
Yeah,
but he's been playing on large bore stuff for years, you know, and even with Wayne Bergeron, even, you know, his Z model was based on mine, but he's a big guy, and he really plays strong, as you know. I mean, for God's sake, you know, and so he had to open up a couple of areas on his horn, but it's still basically a Z horn, the body and everything like that, except for a few minor changes in his horn.
Is it right that in, you know, Gozzo's time, people were playing medium bores generally? Was that a thing that I heard, or is that not right?
Well, there's not really one answer to that whole thing, because first of all, I don't know what everybody has done. Everybody's a big word, you know.
Yes. I just wonder what the trend was, right? Was there a trend towards bigger mouthpieces, smaller horns, or is that just something that?
There has been periods there was back in the days where people were playing large bore stuff, you know, and a lot of the orchestral players wanted a large bore so they get a bigger sound, you know.
Of course.
What they didn't realize is that they were working harder than they had to work. So there was a period in the 40s when when Martin started making smaller horns with the handcraft that Chris Bote's playing, and then the Martin Committee model came out in, I think, 1946. Everybody was so excited about it, and then 6 months later they were selling them, getting rid of them, because it's called committee because there were 7 different people, I think 6 or 7 people that were on the committee to design that horn. When you get 7 guys in their horn designers, they couldn't agree on things, and so the original Martin, I had 4 of them for a while. The original Martin Committee models had some problems with it, and where Yamaha came into the picture is Bob McCoy. If you know who Bob McCoy was, a top player in the New York area for years. Well, he was one of the top guys in there with Bernie Glow and all those kind of guys, Bob McCoy had a Martin Committee model, and he loaned it to Yamaha to let him copy it.
Gotcha.
And that came out as a 636 model. And I was in Japan with Toshiko's band, and they came to me and wanted me to test horns for them. And I picked up that horn, and first of all, I was playing on a large bore Olds, a P12L, and I was used to redlining, muscling everything with, all these bands and everything. And I picked up that 636, and I overblew it at first. I went, Jesus, that's terrible, a horn.
Yeah.
But I tested, about 20 horns that morning, and then we went out to lunch, and I had a little sake, and I was tired, and I came back and I had to go over the 20 horns again. And this time, I was tired, and I backed off a little bit, and I picked up that 636, and it was suddenly easy to play. The minute I backed off on it, it was easy to play. I wasn't overblowing it.
Yeah.
One of the biggest problems, there are 2 huge problems worldwide that I've observed in all the years of teaching, which I don't really do, but there is that most people play too tight in the aperture and they overblow. Those are the 2 most common things. And the third thing is they press the mouthpiece in and mash it up. I call it the 3 Ps, the pinch, press, and pray. And if you're an atheist, you only get 2 Ps, So, but you see, it's a common thing. And one of the reasons that a lot of this happens, Louis, is that there's been a tradition. Tradition is like Fiddler on the Roof, movie play and all that. But there's been the tradition to start people on a kid, 10-year-old kid on a 7C, Bach 7C mouthpiece. Too freaking big. And what happens is when a kid has no chops, no knowledge, no experience, doesn't understand how it works.
Yeah.
The mouthpiece, when he goes up there and tries to put an airstream into it, the airstream wants to go up there and kill something, but it goes in and it sees this gigantic cathedral-like mouth cup there. It drops your velocity of your air, so you have to pinch the lips tighter together to get the velocity tighter back up, and then press the mouthpiece up against your lips. It becomes habitual because that's the way every kid plays, and it becomes the habit and an amateur problem that eventually has to be completely revised, at some point. That's a lot of what I do. Is I see kids that they're playing on too big of a mouthpiece. They used to say, play on the biggest mouthpiece that you can. Well, it's the opposite is my consideration, as you should play on the smallest mouthpiece and then underline that you can get away with.
Yes.
Okay? It has to serve your purposes, your needs, Of
course.
If you're trying to play lead trumpet on a 3C mouthpiece, your testicles are going to be up in your throat,
Yeah, it seems like more work than is necessary, right?
It increases the effort level, And so I started designing a set of beginner mouthpieces, and the Kelly Mouthpiece Company was going to make them. But then Jim Kelly passed away, I guess, because they went out of business. And I never hear from them. But I want to get a set of mouthpieces made for beginners. It's that first year that they're on the horn that I'm mostly concerned about.
What sort of shape would you go for a beginner?
Well, I brought it down to very simplistic, that when you look at the thickness of the fleshiness in a person's lips, almost everybody has a thicker bottom lip than a top one. That's pretty common. Not always, but pretty common. But like my lips are medium to thin on the side, Yours are a little thicker than mine. So, you have more on the bottom lip than I do.
Yeah.
Noticeably more. But one of the things is anybody that's in the medium to thin side, I would put them on the inside diameter of a Bach 10.5 or a Giardinelli 41 64ths, or like a Giardinelli 10, you know?
Yeah.
Okay. That's a narrow one because the thinner lips don't need a wide one. But people who have very fleshy lips, thicker ones, and especially when they're young, they don't have a lot of power in the facial muscles, so they're going to blow those lips into the cup.
Yeah.
So you go to the inside diameter of a Bach 3.
Huh.
Okay. Now, the other thing about it is that's the inside diameter. But the other thing that's critical is the shape of the cup. So here's a oversimplistic, but, you know, you don't want that for a beginner. You want this. You don't want this for a beginner. That's like giving your kid a Ferrari to learn to drive. You know, he's going to tear up, crash the car. But right here, you're moving the throat closer to the guy's chops. You're taking away all of this bowl stuff taken away. He's going to get quicker response. He's going to have less need to compensate by pinching and pressing and lighting candles and so forth. Yeah. Yeah. And so just if you start a kid's, you can pretty much, I think, get the majority of the trumpet players that are 10 years old starting on a trumpet. You can get the majority of the world on 2 mouthpieces for that first year. And there might be a few exceptions. The biggest lips I ever saw were on a postman from Ventura, California, and it looked like he had 2 bananas on his face. They were so thick, I had never seen chops that. I mean, they were really thick. I mean, big. You know, like a sausage or something, you know?
Yeah.
And he was trying to play.
Yeah.
I had Marcinkiewicz make a mouthpiece that it was almost like this.
What's that? Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so it was so wide that it could touch on the orbicular muscle. His lips were so thick that he had to put on a mouthpiece that was very wide to touch. Have you ever seen one of these?
No, what is that?
This is it's called Chasson's mouthpiece. It's to help. It's a crossover mouthpiece. It's to help with embouchure issues.
Oh yeah.
But it's the size of a trombone out here.
Huh. But
it's got a trumpet shank on it.
Wow. That's fun. So what's the reason for it?
Well, when you have Bell's palsy and things like that, where your side of your face collapses on you, you want to go to a mouthpiece like that forces you to overcompensate for the muscles, stuff like that, and it helps you.
That's very interesting.
It's very interesting, yeah. You know, I
roll my top lip out of the way inside here.
Yeah, that's a good thing to do. And you should probably roll I had a kid yesterday in a lesson that he's a young up-and-coming player up in the San Francisco area, and he doesn't even know what he wants to do. I said, what's your plans for your career? I don't know yet. He's studying with me, and he's studying with a classical guy in the Dallas Symphony.
Yeah.
And I don't know the guy in the Dallas Symphony that he's studying with, but I'm always a little concerned that symphonic players have a tendency to make you want to play the way they play, rather than allowing this guy to find his own chops, you know, and his own system, you know. So that is an issue. But his lips are very thick, and he's got a huge overbite too with the top teeth. Yeah. So I'm having him roll in. Like if you go to Google Lee Morgan trumpet, you know, and then when you get it, there's a one that says photos up in there, and you click on the photos. And if Lee Morgan is not playing, he's got quite thick lips. But when you watch pictures of him playing, it's like this. They roll in. Cat Anderson stood next to me for years. We played lots of gigs together, and Cat rolls his chops in like that. So
rolling them on the teeth, right? Like that.
Yeah, but you don't want to get it on top of the teeth because it'll cut you. But you pull them back against your gums and teeth like this. When I play,
yeah.
There's a little bit here because that's the left side, but I'm right-handed, so I'm right-faced.
Huh.
And a person who's dominant right-handed plays more dominantly with the right side of their face than the left.
Yeah, I'm on my right. Yeah.
Your left side is your weaker side, probably.
Yeah, really, very much so.
Yeah. Well,
I have air escape on my left, if I ever escape.
Yeah, and that's one of the things to overcome that is you have to, when you're doing lip buzzing, isometric lip buzzing, what you have to do is isolate in the process, So if the right side of my face is strong and the left side's a little bit weaker, I've tried to bring them to similar levels of strength on both sides. Okay, but so if I have a student who's right-handed, I have him cover his right cheek a little bit gently, and then take his finger on the left corner and go. It's a tongue attack. Yeah, and as you push on it, you're telling the muscle, come on, god dang it, get stronger, get. And that equalizes the strength on both sides. But the average person, when they buzz, they'll get like, and it'll leak out the weak side.
Yeah. I like that.
This is all where physiological and anatomical science comes into play.
Yeah.
Once you understand how muscles respond and react to the nervous system and everything, it's easier.
Do you spend much time thinking about, obviously, the resistance of the horn having an effect on where the lips are buzzing inside the cup? Is this something that you think about much? Like how much
I don't think about it much now, but I've had a lot of realizations about that over the years.
Yeah.
One of the things I tried to explain to you a few moments ago, or when we were talking, is about I'll say this: the mouthpiece is the transduction unit that you need to be most familiar with. Yeah. The horn is an innocent bystander. If you can't play the mouthpiece, I tell my students, if you can't play the mouthpiece, you can't play the horn.
Oh, I can't play the mouthpiece at all. Can you explain?
Well, the mouthpiece, it's called a mouthpiece because it's a piece and we stick it on our mouth. Yeah. But its function in physics, it's a transducer.
Okay.
Trans, T-R-A-N-S, means across.
Okay.
Trans-American Airlines will take you across the planet. Yeah. Okay? Trans-duce comes from the word duct, which means tubing.
Okay.
Look at it, it's a tube.
Yeah.
So it's a message center. You send a message up to it. If the mouthpiece can't match up what you want, embouchure-wise, and if your habits as far as pressure and pinching and twisting and all kinds of weird shit like that, if those things are not aligned properly with that mouthpiece, when you slide the trumpet on there, you can't put garbage in and get pearls out the other side, Huh. The trumpet is an amplifier for what you do on the mouthpiece. So if you play too tight in here, you'll get. You slide the trumpet on, that's what you're going to get, but louder.
Yeah.
But when you do.
Yeah.
But so the mouthpiece is the best self-diagnostic tool in the world for
what exercises do you use for mouthpiece buzzing? Do you have a series of things that you like to do?
Well, I basically use 3 mouthpieces, but I don't use this one as much. This is my lead piece that Yamaha makes,
Yeah. Yeah.
It's based on an old Giardinelli 10S.
Yeah.
I don't play lead anymore. I don't really want to play lead anymore,
Yeah.
So that's fine. I don't The only time I ever play a double C is when somebody purchases a horn and ships it to me for a tweaking, and I'll tweak every horn up to a double C. You know, I can play one. I mean,
it's just there.
I've trained my embouchure to work. Yeah, and the other thing I play is my jazz mouthpiece, which is probably equivalent to a Bach 3D. It's not a C.
As well. Yeah,
it's wider, and for many years I played on a Bach 9D, which was closer to a 10 inside diameter. The album I did with Tom Harrell, I used that.
That's a great record. Album. I love that record.
Well, there was a bit of high stuff, and trying to keep up with Tom Harrell is like, you know.
Oh, you sound amazing. We used to geek out on that record so much. Love it. It's so
well, the two of us had such wonderful respect for each other, you know.
Yeah.
I took his place with Horace Silver.
Yeah.
And you know, and I always wanted to play with Horace Silver. It was one of the greatest achievements I ever had in my life, is I wanted to always play with Horace Silver, and I got to do a couple of albums with him and play. But you know, following in the footsteps of Kenny Dorham and Donald Byrd and, you know, Tom Harrell and, you know, all of the great players, Blue Mitchell especially, and who was like my compadre, you know. I mean, Blue and I were like known Bill Holman wrote a tune for us called Blue and Shew. Yeah. It's a tune we used to go out and play on all the time, you know. Yeah. I did that with a couple of other people. When we recorded it, Blue wasn't on the record date, and so I recorded that with Conte Condoli. Nice. I didn't want to do it. I said, no, it's for Blue, you know, but Louis Belson said, no, we're going to do it, you know. So I've always hated Louis for that, you know, because I wanted to do it with Blue, you know, but you know, anyway, the whole point about the mouthpiece is that like Alan Vizzuti, his father was his teacher at 4 years old, you know, and his father, according to a story, I don't remember it exactly, but Alan told me when he started at 4 years old, his father gave him only a mouthpiece, and he just buzzed on a mouthpiece for several weeks before he was ever given a trumpet to put on the end of the mouthpiece, you know. Oh. And if people take a mouthpiece and you sit down and do you know, you can straighten out problems. When you go glissando, you stop right there. And lowering your jaw and reopening the aperture is the only way you're going to solve that. You know, it's not the color of the socks you have on or whether your hair looks good or anything like that. I mean, it has nothing to do with bullshit. It has to do with science. If the airstream has to match the aperture, period.
When you came to the Royal Academy of Music, you did a clinic there. You did, I think half of it was jazz, and then half of it was trumpet. And you got on the whiteboard and you drew your thing where it's been a long time now since I saw this, so I was just going to ask you about it in the last sort of 5 minutes.
Where was that, Royal Academy?
The Royal Academy in London, yeah. It must have been in 2014 or something like that. So, 10 years ago, 11 years ago while I was there. And you drew the big circle of the mouthpiece. And this is something that's come up very recently, just in my trumpet journey. Aiming the air into the cup.
Oh, air pivoting.
Can you just? Okay, here we go. There it is for anyone that can see. So,
and this is not an option. This is part of physics, fluid dynamics. You have to do it, and you're doing it.
You're doing it whether you like it or not. Can I see that one more time, Bobby? Do you mind?
Yeah.
Can I see that one more time, please?
Sure. One of the things about it is most people are doing it and don't know they're doing it. So don't take this literally, especially this stuff down here, because the student of mine that did these drawings ended up in jail. You know, but no. The point is that when you're playing in the low register, your airstream is aimed at the bottom of the cup, and as you ascend, it tilts upward like that. And let me show you another thing, a little piece of science. That'll be fine. When you teach online, you got to have a lot of papers, man. You know, I mean, papers. Here's what's actually occurring. It's called vortex shedding. Okay, when you aim your airstream at the bottom of the cup, you have the entire cup for resonance. Okay, as you tilt it upward, see that it's an eddy. It's a whirlpool.
That makes sense.
It's the same thing that gets an airplane off the ground when you taxi. That's why they tilt the wing flaps.
Do some people do this with like the actual pivot of the instrument, like the angle of the instrument? Because
they have to if they have an overbite.
And that's what I end up doing. I have a lot of this. So when I go higher, I'm pulling down and aiming up. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, I can show you that. I have another piece of paper.
You have all the paper, Bobby. I love it.
I got a lot of papers, man. See, so when the teeth are aligned, you do it all with your jaw. When there's an overbite, you have to tilt it. Let me show you. I can do a quick demonstration for you. This is easy. This is so easy. One of the things about a lot of professors, so-called trumpet teachers, they never look at the teeth of a student.
Yeah.
And a lot of band directors screw up a lot of amateurs by saying, "Get those bells up."
Yeah.
You know? Well, the guy that's got an overbite, for him to get the bells up, he's got to tilt his head back. Now he's got a trachea problem, and in the base of the skull, right at the beginnings of the spinal column, on either side of the brain, there's a reticular formation. And if you pull your head back like this and you'll pinch that, you can pinch the nerves, and your arms and fingers will go numb on you.
Yeah.
It can even shallow up your breathing. So let me show you something. This is simple. There's three, let's call them three positions on the face, okay? 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah.
Okay? Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to use this pen. And you can't be tilted. It has to be straight. So you put this here. Now I'll do it this way. I put my pen on the bullseye. See that bullseye on there?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll put it there. Now for me to hit that bullseye, my airstream has to come out like this.
Yeah.
So I have to recede my jaw.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I put it here. Bring the bullseye. Now my jaw comes slightly forward, and I go. This is a spitting rice drill, okay? Clark Terry showed me that. And then so here, now my airstream has to go like that. If I do my jaw forward, way forward, I can do it. I don't get any TMJ problems back here, but I can feel it in the TMJ when I do that. But people with an overbite, when they try to push their jaw too far forward, they get.
I can feel it. Yeah.
You can get pain back here. You know.
Yeah.
It can. If you don't do it correctly, when I was very young and I played incorrectly, I ripped the tendon that holds my jaw in place on the right side, and the jaw fell out of the socket. You know. Wow. It was like a total. I had to. And luckily, I got it back together with a lady by the name of Eloise Ristad, who did shiatsu thing on my body and got it straight. But back to this thing. So the eddy is a whirlpool, and that part of the cup is no longer valid. The whirlpool increases as you lift the airstream, and what you're doing is you're actually making your cup shallower.
That makes sense.
You're creating dead space inside of the cup, which is no longer part of the airstream. The airstream is going up, and all the shit below it is not functioning. So,
do you know anything about open bites, Bobby? My teeth don't shut. I don't know if that's.
Well, I mean, there's a solution to every problem, but I've heard you play, and you don't sound to me like anybody that's having any difficulty.
No, I'm intrigued. Thank you. I'm intrigued as to what effect you may think this has, if any. If it doesn't matter, probably doesn't matter. Probably not worth thinking.
Well, the main thing is you don't want any obstructions to the airstream by your teeth or by anything. John Faddis has like a little chip in one of his teeth there, and he uses that hole that goes through. I have, you can see here. You see that right there? There's a little.
Yeah.
There's a little in that tooth. There's a little space there. It doesn't come up to the others. It's like there's a little tiny thing, and that's like a little pathway for my airstream, you know.
Yeah.
But there was a guy, a trumpet teacher in Pittsburgh, years ago. I don't remember his name offhand now, but he used to insist that people. He would drill part of your teeth away, so he could open up a pathway for the airstream. You know. Well, it's screwed up. Horrible thing. And
I know a lot of great players with perfect teeth. You don't need to have the gap. It might just work for you, but you know.
Well, perfect teeth and $6 will get you a cup of coffee. You know. Look at Al Porcino's teeth. It looked like a bag of peanuts from a Southwest Airlines flight. You know. Look at mine.
Yeah.
They're all crooked. That's a cap. I hit it myself with a hammer when I was building my studio.
Oh, man. I can't even. I knocked that tooth out. But luckily, what happened is it broke off as one piece. Okay. And I went into the dentist the next morning, and he made a copy of it and put it quickly in there. Yeah. And then 3 days later, I got this one in there, and I went on the road with Sammy Davis. I'd be very careful with my two little kids because they're in the sort of process of throwing their heads back or jumping up as fast as possible. I did put my lip through my teeth about 3 months ago. It was all right, it kind of healed, but you know when that moment when they hit and there's blood, and you don't know whether it's your teeth that are bad or your lip. You'd rather it was your lip because at least the lip can heal. But like it was so numb, I didn't know whether my tooth had gone or like it was horrible, man. But it's fine.
But there's all kinds of nerves in there. See, and when you have any kind of impact in there, you got two things: nerves and muscles. Yeah, muscle will heal faster than a nerve. Yeah, a nerve, according to what I've read and so forth, if you believe everything you read, which I don't, but roughly a nerve. Recovers at about 1 millimeter per month. And so so in a case of like an injury, like a knee replacement, for instance, you know, there's a lot of nerves in the knee and everything. And it takes a long time for the knees to recover. When you have an injury that's more severe, I've had so many surgeries on my body that I've lost count. Yeah. You know, and my hands, I mean, both of my hands have been surgically operated on, but my right arm, the radial nerve starts right here. Yeah. And it goes along the arm up and so forth. And it never stops hurting. Right now, it just feels like it's got an ice pick in it, you know? Yeah. And it affects my ability to use my fingers on both hands. But I have exercise equipment. I can show you one that's really cool. This is, I was lucky to find this thing. Look at this. Huh.
I think I have one of those. That's very cool. Mine looks a bit different. I think it's black. That's great. Yeah.
To try to just build up some strength and so I can play. Because I don't play like I used to. You know, I don't have the chops or the fingers for it.
Or your piccolo trumpet there, Bobby, you know, with the fourth valve.
Yeah, I was never a piccolo player. I recorded a piccolo thing on one album.
Oh, but it sounds amazing.
Questionable.
On that note, I tell you what, Bobby, we got to head over. We're going to do a 30-minute Q&A with my online Trumpet Academy guys, and they're very, very excited here. And we've been going for almost 2 hours, and it's felt like 5 minutes.
Okay. Well, I hope that the stuff that we've talked about, it's completely. I looked at your list of questions. It's like
the list of questions are there just so that I have something to.
Well, they're all good. I mean, they're good.
You're so easy to talk to. I didn't need it, and I think if you're up for it, there's probably another 12 hours worth of of podcasting that you could do because you're a man full of information. So, yeah.
I kissed the Blarney Stone, and so I have the gift of gab, you see.
It's brilliant. I love listening to it, man. It's amazing. Usually it's me, but it's great. It's so good. I love it.
See, I've studied so much anatomy, physiology, and science and physics and stuff.
Yeah.
I have a doctorate degree, but it's useless. It's in music, so.
Oh, that's brilliant. Oh, Bobby Shew, what a fantastic couple of hours. I really, really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
I've loved talking to you, man. It's great.
I'm going to take a lesson with you soon, and who knows, maybe we can record it. We could even release it at some point. But it's an amazing thing to be able to get to talk to you. I really do appreciate it, and
thank you so much, man.
Maybe another time. Who knows?
Okay, yeah, of course.
All right, Bobby. Thanks so much, buddy. I'll speak to you soon.